The gradient here is 1 in 15, not 1 in 50, not 1 in 35, the maximum that most railway engineers of the 19th century considered workable for adhesion traction. 1 in 15, just 2.5 times steeper than the limit the rest of the railway world had drawn. And a train is moving up it. It is moving slowly, 4 miles an hour on the ascent. That is not weakness. That is physics. The locomotive weighing the consist down against the rail is not relying on adhesion alone. Something else is happening beneath the frames. Something that should not be possible on a mainline railway. Something that no commercial insurance underwriter in the Southern Hemisphere was prepared to cover. The year is 1878. The place is the Rimutaka Ranges, New Zealand. The locomotive is the NZRH class, the only Fell Mountain locomotive ever to operate as a permanent fixture of a national mainline railway system. It will run this gradient for the next 77 years. It will never cause a single accident. Nobody has made a film about it. That is what this channel is for. Before we continue, if this kind of railway history matters to you, consider subscribing to the channel. Every video here is built around the locomotives and railway systems that the standard histories overlooked, the machines that outperformed their celebrated counterparts, the engineering decisions that were ahead of their time, and the railway lines that shaped nations without receiving the recognition they deserved. If that is the kind of documentary worth watching to you, the subscribe button is how you tell us. And we want to hear from you. Did you work on the railways as a driver, a fireman, a fitter, a signalman, a track engineer? Did a parent or grandparent spend their career on a railway that is no longer operating, on a locomotive class that is no longer preserved, or in a workshop that is no longer standing? Leave it in the comments. The people who actually operated these machines know things that do not appear in any published railway history. We want to hear from them. Now, back to the locomotive. The question that needed answering in 1871 was not whether a railway from Wellington to Masterton could be built. It could. The question was what to do about the Rimutaka Ranges standing directly between the two. The surveyors had two options. The first was the Parliamentary Line, a route that followed the ridgelines at conventional gradients, threading through terrain so unstable that the earthworks would never be finished. The curves were tighter than the standard minimum. The ground was unsuitable. The cost was prohibitive. The second was a 3-mile incline, dropping from the summit to Cross Creek on the Wairarapa side. Average gradient, 1 in 15. Maximum workable gradient by conventional standards, 1 in 35. John Carruthers, head of the New Zealand Public Works Department, chose the incline. He had one condition: the Fell system. The Fell system was the invention of John Barraclough Fell, a British railway engineer who had already proved the principle on the Mont Cenis Pass Railway in the Alps. The concept was straightforward. Between the two running rails, a raised center rail was laid. The locomotive carried an additional pair of horizontal cylinders driving 4 spring-loaded grip wheels, 2 on each side, that pressed against the center rail under compression. On the steepest grades, those grip wheels provided traction that adhesion alone could never achieve. On the descent, the same mechanism provided braking, bearing against the rail with controlled pressure. 4 locomotives were ordered in 1874 from the Avonside Engine Company of Bristol. 042 T-tank engines with the Fell modification built in from the outset. They were named Mount Cenis, Mount Cook, Mount Egmont, and Mount Tongariro. 2 more, known as the Dreadnoughts, followed from Nielsen and Company in 1886. 6 locomotives, 3 miles of gradient, 77 years of service. No commercial insurance underwriter in the region would cover it. This was not a policy decision made after careful consideration. It was a structural impossibility. The underwriting frameworks that governed railway insurance in the British Empire were built around a maximum working gradient of 1 in 35. Premium tables, actuarial models, liability structures, all of it was calibrated to that limit. The Rimutaka incline, at 1 in 15, existed outside every established category. The New Zealand government absorbed the risk entirely. The line was operated as a public works undertaking, with the Crown accepting liability that no private insurer had a table for. This was not unusual in the pioneering railway environment of 1870s New Zealand, but it was significant. It meant the locomotives, the track, the crews, and the passengers were operating in a regulatory and financial void that the rest of the world's railway industry had never had to address. In England, when the FEL system was first proposed commercially, investors and insurers had the same response. The technology was too unusual. The liability was undefined. The risk could not be priced. What they did not anticipate, what no one anticipated, was what would happen if the machine simply worked. Ascending, the H-class worked at 4 to 6 miles per hour. Descending, the drivers allowed 10 miles per hour, with handbrakes applied against the center rail throughout the descent, and FEL brake vans interspersed through the consist to supplement the locomotive's braking. The loads the system moved were not trivial. By the turn of the century, goods trains of up to 264 tons were ascending the incline, hauled by 4 H-class locomotives spaced through the train. Passenger trains of comparable weight required 5 engines and a crew of 15. The logistics alone demanded a level of operational coordination that had no equivalent on any mainline railway in New Zealand. Cross Creek, at the foot of the Wairarapa side, became the operational nerve center. Locomotives were assembled, checked, and coupled in precise formation. The firemen monitored steam pressure through the ascent. The drivers watched the center rail. Every trip was a managed sequence, not a routine run, and ordinary freight and passenger traffic continued moving across those ranges. Wool, coal, livestock, mail, passengers, year after year. The locomotives that had been ordered because no other solution existed became the backbone of a regional economy. They were never celebrated for it. They simply worked. In September 1880, 2 passenger carriages were blown from the track at Siberia Curve by winds gusting at nearly 200 kilometers per hour. 4 children died. The accident is documented. The grief was real. The H-class locomotive held on. The center rail system, the FEL system, never failed. The carriages were lost to an act of nature that no railway system on Earth could have prevented. Windbreaks were erected at exposed points thereafter. But the locomotive, the grip wheels, the center rail, the engineering that insurers had refused to price, performed exactly as John Barraclough Fell had designed it to perform. The men at Cross Creek understood this distinction. The drivers and fitters who spent careers on the incline knew the difference between weather and mechanical failure. They knew what the system could do and what the mountain could do. They respected both. The H-class locomotives ran for 77 years on that gradient. 6 locomotives, the longest surviving mainline steam locomotives in New Zealand's railway history. They were still on revenue service the week before the Rimutaka Tunnel opened in 1955. On November 3, 1955, the Rimutaka Tunnel opened. The incline closed. 2 of the H-class locomotives were put to work dismantling the track they had spent their lives working. Then they were towed to hut workshops and written off. 5 of the 6 were scrapped. H199, the first of the class, built in 1875, was given to the town of Featherston. It stands today in the Fell Locomotive Museum, the last surviving example of a type of which only 24 were ever built for the entire world. The insurance companies that had refused to price the risk were right about one thing. The Rimutaka incline did not fit any established category. It was not normal railway operation. It was something that existed outside the frameworks anyone had written. What they could not have known, what the operational record now shows, is that the engineers at Ironside, following John Barraclough Fell's principle, had built something that did not fail. For 77 years, on a gradient the insurance market had deemed uninsurable, the H-class ran. It was never famous. The engineering record does not need fame to be true. If this is the kind of railway history you want to keep watching, subscribe to the channel. There are more locomotives, more railway systems, and more engineering achievements still to document. And if you have a connection to what you just watched, a family member who drove this class, worked in the workshops that maintained it, or operated on the railway that deployed it, tell us in the comments. What did they drive? Which railway, which depot, which line? The people who operated these machines are not in the standard histories, but the engineering record depends on what they remember. We want to hear from them.